Welcome to Focus On. My name is Nastasia Arantse, and this episode is coming to you from the Future Minerals Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where global mining executives as well as government officials have descended into Riyadh to tap into the capital that Saudi Arabia is plugging into mining investments. And this is as the kingdom is seeing itself as a key role player in the super region, which stretches from Central Asia to the Middle East as well as Africa. In what it says holds a third of the mineral resources, some of which are the critical minerals that are needed for the green energy transition. Take a listen to some of the conversations that we had at the Future Minerals Forum. You look at the number of investors who are in the room, the number of mining executives, as well as the government delegations that are here, and you get a sense that they do believe in Vision 2030. How confident are you that that belief is going to translate into foreign direct investment, especially in the mining sector, and especially in the opportunities that you see in that space?
And I'm a true believer in the art of execution. I think it's a lot of countries, a lot of companies, a lot of private sector can build a strategy on paper, very nice, but very hard to execute. I think Saudi Arabia, in our Vision 2030, we mastered the art of execution. And by saying this, in mining, when we started from the early days of developing our strategy, it was with private sector. We took private sector interest to understand exactly what they need, and we realized at the very early stage that without balancing private sector interest with the state or the government or the country's interest, it would be very hard to build the sector. So today I'm happy to say that every investor who looked at our mining investment law, for example, say that it is a very interesting one. It's very competitive. It addresses two challenges. One is the tax regime. We are, we have a great tax straightforward policy, and the other, which is also important, is licensing. And today we have proven to investors that licensing in Saudi can take between 90 to 180 days maximum, and this is not something that we find elsewhere.
I think in talking to some of the mining executives, they were quite excited about some of the opportunities. And from your perspective, amongst those opportunities, where do you see the challenges that you're going to be focusing on, at least over the next year or two, in order to actually have a lot of the global community believing in that Vision 2030?
The mining is relatively new, and the country is big. So today we are able to direct investors to the areas, for example, where there is proper infrastructure. But I think with time, this will become more and more a challenge. But this is something we are working on. The other thing is water. Saudi Arabia also is short of water, and there we need to be very, very mindful of this resource and how we can use it to the best. So we are working with the Ministry of Environment and Water and Agriculture to ensure that their projects of recycling of water is close to our mining activities. And but I'm not really I'm very confident that these challenges can be looked at. Especially the beauty about mining is we can predict the flow, we can see the interest of investors, and we can act accordingly.
When we talk about the year of impact, it's quite interesting that yesterday you signed 6 memorandums of understandings with 6 regions. Talk to me about the significance of those MOUs and the opportunities you see. Let's talk about Zambia, for instance.
I think it's I can group the countries into 2 major groups. One is the producing countries, and I have said it many times. Without Africa, it would be very hard to see the energy transition happen. So we need to see how we can help these countries, the producing countries, help them with investment, with technology, with infrastructure, with human capital development, and so on. The other side is really countries who are consumers, who are looking at securing materials for their own industrialization and energy transition. And we need this part of the table because they also help us figure out the solution. They push investors, they co-invest, they give credibility to different assets and projects. And collectively, I think that's how we will achieve the goals.
Key to any investment opportunity is due diligence. Knowing the risk factor in different regions does change the direction as to where investors will focus on. OECD's Director of Financial and Enterprise Affairs unpacks this in more detail.
When you talk about the due diligence and some of the work that you do in promoting, or rather promoting sustainable supply chains, what are some of the issues you're trying to address within that space, especially when it comes to Africa and the critical minerals sector?
Yeah, this is a very important topic. On the one side, OECD obviously is a standard setter. We have been developing standards in many areas, including this one. 25 years ago, we have the global standard, which is the multinational enterprise guidelines for responsible business conduct, and which also is dealing with this topic. And then we developed also in 2010, actually, Lusaka Declaration, our due diligence guidance for responsible supply chains of minerals for conflict affected and high-risk areas. The idea that, obviously we need, this is a market increasingly without borders, so that's why the need of global standards adapting to local specificities. What we really think is the case and should be perceived much more, maybe it was not done in the past, is that we have important countries in Africa that are also where also the production of some critical minerals and metals here is concentrated. But I would say not often this has been done to the benefit of those countries broadly, of the communities, of the people, of the stakeholders. And this is important to do. And it's important because also to have more, stability. So the engagement, with local stakeholders is more and more important. So due diligence is an essential part. Conditions, of work. Again, there cannot be boundaries or difference among countries on that. But also other parts of the work that across the house at the OECD we are doing. For example, tax. Increasingly we have seen in the past some, I would say, tax erosion, moving, profits with transfer pricing outside those countries, which is a lack of revenues. We need to increase, trade, having maybe less trade restriction, increasing and incentivizing investment, but again, for the benefit also of those countries.
The one thing I found interesting is that we have a lot of African countries here, a lot of ministers who are eager to promote their countries because many of these countries have mineral-rich deposits which are very important for the critical mineral sector. But on the other side of this, there's this perception of risk when it comes to a lot of these countries. In your engagement as the OECD, when you talk with, say, investors, etc., what is that perception of risk? And are we finally gaining traction and investors being able to be open-minded about some of these countries?
Yeah, this is a very good point. There is this, sometimes there is this perception, as often is the case, perception maybe are not really well, grounded, but they are there. And perceptions, right or wrong, they drive international, flow of capital and investment. So I think is essential, and this is part of really of our work that we want to do, is this, I would say, de-risking. Trying to alleviate the perception, and especially when this is just a perception, trying to, to diminish, because other things being equal, this can drive either more capital or more investment, or in any case, a cheaper, cost. How to do it? First of all, there are basic issues like, disclosure, transparency, data, comparability of data, traceability and certification. This is an essential part of the work we want to do also with the platform, but everyone is talking about this. Disclosure of, ultimate shareholdings, having, also system in place, so standards that are, updated, implemented and monitored. Having an efficient system also, again, is important part of our work also with many countries, anti-corruption. So maybe, again, is a perception, but there is this, so we need also to work on that. And again, to work involving, having the buy-in of the local communities, but also on this side of the great investors.
Let's talk about this virtual platform. Is this going to be the first of its kind for Africa? Are other countries receptive and open to being part of the platform, sharing their data in order for you to bridge those gaps between the African countries and the call it the outside world in terms of investments?
Yeah, this is a big big project actually, which has also started. Many countries are obviously interested in that. There's been a great push by G7. Okay, so this has been also started in the G7 environment, presented basically as a deliverable of the PGIA, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment. Great push, I have to say. Also, lastly, but the last G7 under Italian presidency, a push of other countries, Spain, European Union. So it's going to be presented in a few weeks, and I think it will be a sort of catch-22, chicken and egg. Basically, we will start then, liquidity attracts liquidity. So I think there will be the awareness that sharing data, information and disclosure, it's a win-win situation. So there is nothing to hide. The less, the more is public and again, in a good way, the better is for a country. So I think this is going to be really a structural break. It's a path, obviously, nothing will happen just by chance. But I think it's going to be very, very important. And then, I would say, it's top down, G7, bottom up. So, and the OECD is working very close on that a lot, full time, many colleagues on many directorates. So I think it's going to be very effective.
As delegates debate and discuss the impacts of financing of critical minerals, policy necessities, and signed MOUs, actionable changes are still required.
Yesterday, we had some of the countries signing memorandums of understanding between themselves and Saudi Arabia. And I think one of the things that we took away from the ministerial roundtables was that there needs to be, further agreement, further strengthening of ties. Where do we bridge the gap in terms of, making sure that the African countries with the mineral-rich deposits are also having their voices heard in the global space, especially as it relates to the critical mineral sector?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would completely agree with that. I think for us as the Critical Minerals Africa Group, we were established because we just didn't see an advocacy platform for the continent, particularly when it came to international dialogues around critical minerals, value addition, supply chain, value chains as well. And I think it's wonderful that this is being discussed at this event. I'd say FMF have been a real clear spearheading platform for a lot of these international dialogues and discussions, and decisions also being made. In fact, I believe it was an event that this FMF hosted 2 years ago that 20 or so of the African ministers decided that they wanted to group together and form more of a partnership. And I think that's promising for us. I think when you think about critical minerals, there's so many that exist, but we need to be very clear about which countries can develop from those critical minerals. At the moment, what we're seeing is that everybody's jumping on the electric vehicle bandwagon, wanting to create electric vehicle batteries, but not everybody can do that. And also, when we think that the dominant player in this space is China, how are we going to compete in terms of cost and pricing? So I think it's smart for us to galvanize at these events strategies that will actually be useful for us down the line. We don't need all the critical minerals. We can identify one or two and then build those critical minerals around our own African industrialization plans. And I think one of the key benefits of coming to FMF is that you get everybody in one room. You have a lot of time to talk about these things and come up with ideas and plans. And it's not just about being a silo country offering critical mineral strategy. We need to think about regions and then ultimately the African Continental Free Trade Area as well.
The Minister of Mineral Development mentioned that part of the FMF, the theme is the year of impact. And a lot of people can say we can talk as much as we want around the table, sign various agreements, but we got to be able to see that action translate into investments on the ground.
Yes.
What would you like to see as the Critical Minerals Africa Group in order to believe that that impact is finally starting to materialize?
For me, it comes down to simple facts, which is where do the investment opportunities lie? And I think we're very good at creating grand visions and plans and strategies which are vital for the development of critical minerals. But ultimately, what does that mean for the investor? How can we unlock those opportunities for the investor? We've heard about the Lobito corridor. It's very exciting. It's a 15, 20-year project. But ultimately, what are those investment opportunities available? We know that the port needs to be redeveloped. We know that there needs to be roads and other infrastructure development along that corridor. And so what I would like to see more of, and what would give me some comfort, is for us to understand, precisely almost a deal book of where those investment opportunities lie, and then helping unlock financing for that, and also, the guarantees of risks and so forth. So I would like us to move beyond the strategy, then looking specifically at investment opportunities around mining development, going a little bit further than that at times as well, with, say, agricultural development as well.
In the work that you do and the engagements that you have with the private sector, with investors, what are they saying about, plugging in capital in some of these mineral-rich countries that do tend to come with a little bit of risk? Are they open to navigating around some of that risk? How are they thinking about those countries?
So yes, there are countries which have more risk than others. I think if you're in the mining industry, it comes hand in hand, risk and mining often. But what we're trying to do is look at innovative ways of financing. That's something that we're really working closely with our members on. We've seen some great projects develop in Namibia where they've got mining development. So one of the it's actually a British company, has a mining exploration license, but they're looking at developing agricultural land around there, so it's not just the mining project itself. So that creates further financing opportunities. And we'd also like to see, the development of the OEMs now looking at procuring some of the mines to shore up their own supply. Again, that's an offtake agreement. So again, innovative financing solutions we're seeing in this space. So we are seeing this develop more and more. We'd like to see more of it. We're trying to support our members in looking for these innovative finance solutions, and just encouraging financiers to start looking at how they can get involved in critical minerals as well.
Africa holds 30% of the world's mineral reserves, yet it does not always benefit from the supply chain. Is Africa missing an opportunity to develop? We speak to Graham Kerr, CEO of South 32, on developments impacting Africa's mining sector.
On the side of our conversation, you mentioned that this is the first time you're attending the Future Minerals Forum, and I'm interested to get your take in terms of the conversation so far and the engagements.
Yeah, look, absolutely. It is my first time, and first, thanks for having me today. Look, from my side, it's been quite engaging to hear people talking about the messaging. So when I say the messaging, there's more and more of a recognition that the world is short of a number of critical minerals that it is going to need, and some things need to change to sort of bring those in production to help the world go through that energy transformation for that next stage of economic development. But it's been good actually listening to obviously how the Saudi government's thinking about it, but also a number of different stakeholders here as well.
When you having conversations with your peers in the industry, or perhaps even with investors, what's your take on Saudi's positioning, especially in the critical mineral sector, and also in what they describe as the super region?
Yeah, look, I think that it's probably fair to say for our peers, there's a recognition that they can be a very large investor who can actually shift the needle. And we've seen that obviously with their investment in Vale-based metals, where they've been a substantial underwriter of that business. So I think that outbound capital, everyone sees potential. I think the piece around inside Saudi, I think that's things people are still getting their mind around. And that's certainly part of my reason of coming, is to understand that a little bit more about what those opportunities are like, but also how the government and different bodies would actually work.
Are there opportunities that you find interesting that you want to sort of do a little bit more research, a bit more work in, that could be appealing?
So we'll certainly walk away from this with the teams having a bit of work to do on a couple of different opportunities, both obviously in this part of the world, but also other parts of the world.
From your point of view, in terms of where mining is going, where are we right now?
It's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of moving pieces. Obviously you've got geopolitics going on with the world sort of almost dividing. But I think you are coming to that realisation the world is short of a number of critical commodities. But also, I don't think the industry is invested in things like exploration and development for 15 years, which is probably going to exacerbate that supply-demand gap for things like copper and zinc. So I think the industry is at that interesting time where, I could see some longer-term pricing support. But I think at the same time, people are going to have to make decisions to invest in their business because shareholders at the moment are still very much about cash. Like the idea, you might have growth options, but please don't spend my money on capital projects. Give it back to me. So I think it's that dynamic that will work for the next 6 or 12 months will be interesting. And obviously the overlay of geopolitics about what does it mean, sanctions, what impact does that have?
I mean, take me in here for somebody who's not necessarily in the mining sector. When you're looking to invest, what ticks off the box for your shareholders, for you and the board to want to actually plug in that heavy capital?
So we've just made a large investment decision in the US, in Arizona. It's in a complex we call Hermosa, and the first project's Taylor. It's lead, silver and zinc. That's about a $2.4 billion investment that we've actually just approved. To sort of make that obviously work from a board perspective, there needs to be an attractive commodity, there needs to be a good return on the project, but also how does it fit is important with our purpose. Particularly for us, our purpose is very much built on the premise that we mine other people's resources. And actually, funny enough, building in Arizona in Santa Cruz County, it's one of the poorest places in the US. And one of the reasons I love the project is it's going to lift a lot of people out of poverty. And it's going to obviously deliver returns for our shareholders, but I love the combination of the two together. So for the board, commodity, financial attractiveness, how does it fit with our purpose?
I love the part where you talk about lifting people out of poverty, because I had a conversation with the CEO of Vale Base Minerals, and we spoke about multi-stakeholder engagements, the importance of involving communities to be part of the vision that you have for the region. Take me through your experience in being able to make traction, make impact with the communities, getting them involved, and to buy into the vision that you have for the area.
Look, I think that one of the reasons I'm passionate about mining, and again it's reflected in our purpose, is that I do believe if done well, i.e. sustainably, mining makes a difference. And I had that experience in my early days in BHP, where I worked a number of different stints through the Akati diamond mine. And over probably 2.5 decades, you saw a whole generation of people be lifted out of poverty and getting opportunities around education, business, etc. That's what really got my roots in mining and got me passionate about it. If we go back to the project we're doing in the US at the moment, Taylor and Santa Cruz County, we're talking about a county that is below the poverty line, lots of metrics, a lot of high unemployment numbers, not a lot of opportunities. We already see over the last 3 or 4 years have been there, a lot of local Hispanic people who have joined our business, and it's been a game changer for them and their family. They've got cars, they've got insurance, they've got things they've never had before because they're more casual produce workers. That's what I like, but the challenge is in all these stakeholders, you've got to do a lot of work to enrol the governments, federal and local. You've got to do a lot of work to involve all the stakeholders, but also recognise that you're never going to please everyone. So, but you're trying to get maybe 85, 90% of the people there to understand the benefit.
What are some of the opportunities that you're seeing on the African continent?
Africa, I think, is such a place that has so much potential that needs to be untapped. I think there is an aspect of political stability and, how that works through the mining regulation and process is going to be a big part. If you think about what's happening in the mining space, the capital investments are getting larger, the time frame to deliver is getting longer. So I think that means there's more risk on mining companies to do it. You do need fiscal stability and political stability in the countries where you actually do that, I think, to actually get more investment, which will create more opportunities and effectively grow the size of the pie for everyone.
In the few hours that I've been here, I've managed to engage with ministers who are part of the ministerial roundtable that took place yesterday. And the one thing that they said that they took out of those conversations is that we need to get over, the geopolitical political aspect, navigate our way through, but then also have a real serious conversation about how we attract investment in order to actually gain more traction in the critical mineral sector. When you look at, the space that you're in the mining sector, and you take into consideration some of the things that are playing out globally, what's a challenge for you? What's a risk for you that you're eyeing?
Yeah, look, I think a challenge, and if I was going to be quite candid, the challenge for us is we've made an investment decision where there's becoming a change of politics in the US. How that plays out yet, we'll wait and see. Typically, Republicans are more pro-mining and pro-development, so we're hoping it's positive, but also politics is politics, yet we don't know. I think the other thing for us is we think about investing in places like South Africa and Mozambique. It is that political stability, and what does that actually look like, not only for the next couple of years, but the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
With some of the events playing out in Mozambique, have you worked out sort of scenario analysis in terms of what happens over the next year or so? What have been the engagements with your board?
So first and foremost, I'd always say, look, we have a lot of our people are Mozambican, and it's a difficult time for them at the moment. So obviously that's our first priority, making sure they're supported, and we're doing what we can do in that space. And Mozambique's actually been a place we've operated for many decades, Mozal, and it's been a great operation for many years. In fact, in the smelting business, it's probably been one of the benchmarks when it comes to aluminium smelter. Obviously, at the moment, there's some civil unrest that's occurring in the country. You know, we've tried to engage the government, obviously, on how a smelter works, because it's not like a mine where you can shut it and leave it. You shut the pots in, you can't really go back and start them easily. So we've been talking a lot to not only the government, but also the opposition about, well, the impact of the smelter, the importance of Mozal, because we're probably about just under 4% of the GDP. 1 in 3 manufacturing jobs in Maputo, the capital, actually works for us. So keeping that ticking over, we think, is not only important for our shareholders and our people, but also the people of Mozambique. I'm hoping, obviously, things settle down and it eases back in the right direction.
When you look at South Africa, there's been great chatter and conversation around the government of national unity. Everyone was quite excited about the way the elections played out, and we kind of saw that in the capital market activity in terms of the way, shares have been performing. Are you liking what you're hearing from the government of national unity?
Very much so. So if we talk about confidence building, heading in the right direction, it feels like a step forward. Certainly dialogue with the government is very different than what it used to be. And in fairness, since the departure of Zuma, we've seen quite a change, not only from him, but I think the next under Cyril was quite different and improvement. But this next step, we think, is a continued improvement on the right pathway.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Focus On as we track the conversations that are taking place here at the 4th Future Minerals Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. This year, the focus has been on the Year of Impact, been the theme for the forum. And it's been quite interesting to track some of the discussions and themes that are quite important to the global mining executives as well as the government officials that are here. Until next time, goodbye.